I'm Vicki Kellick with Baird and Warner, and I am here today with our very first episode of Person of Interest, where we get to meet some people who are interesting and who you should probably know about. Today, I have David Mann. He most recently was a senior pastor at the St. Charles Free Methodist Church here in St. Charles. In 2018, he took a scheduled sabbatical and went to live with family to be closer to them in Indian Land, South Carolina. And that is a suburb of Charlotte. Is that correct?
It's south of Charlotte, yes.
South of Charlotte, perfect. So that's where he was. And when he was there, he also enrolled in an MBA program from the University of Louisiana, Shreveport. And that is where he got his MBA. And then he also, along with core classes, obviously, he also studied international marketing, leadership communication, and also Six Sigma process improvement. And so while he was doing all of that, that's what brought him to us today, because he just has a fascinating story about what he's done with his life and what he's looking to do in the future. So Dave, just tell us a little bit about your goals going forward and what you're looking to do in the future.
Okay, well, to best explain it, I need to explain a little bit about my background. And back before, after high school, I worked for a while. I went to Whittier College for a year. Didn't do well. We didn't agree with each other very well. And then I took another year off and worked. And at the end of that time, I was trying to figure out what was I going to do with my life. And there was a couple things that came together at that particular time that caused me to make some decisions. And one of those things was I knew that I needed to go back to university and study something. And so I looked at what I had done well in at Whittier, and I had done well in botany. And I'd also done well in political science. And I said, well, what do I want to do in the future? I don't want to do political science. So let's study something having to do with plants. Around the same time, I read an article in Scientific American about people who are doing plant research, trying to develop plants that people in developing nations could use in poor soils that were frequently flooded and had high salt content. And I just found that intriguing. And so I wanted to, one of these ideas I had in the back of my mind was, I'd like to do some research in that kind of thing, be able to help people with, I have an interest in plants. I have this desire to do something with my life. And maybe that's a way I could go. So I started looking for schools and ended up choosing West Texas State University. A lot of reasons. Again, the long stories, don't need to go into all of them. But one of the things that was important to me was that the head of the plant science department had his doctorate in plant genetics. And since that was something that was in the back of my mind, that helped me apply to the school. I went to the school and studied horticulture. And I was on the track to get a horticulture degree in the plant science department, which was a section of the agriculture school. So you had to study everything. You had to study animal science. You had to study animal nutrition. You had to study about insects and field crops and sheep and pigs. The gestation period of a pig is 3 months, 3 weeks, 3 days. I can tell you all of these things that I had to study, because it was part of the core. But in the middle of that time, I was invited by a friend to go to Switzerland and study at a place called L'Abri Fellowship. And the focus of L'Abri is on studying worldviews, and it comes from a Christian perspective, but it makes a comparison. They invite people to come and talk about things and debate, and it was just sounded like a great opportunity. My friend invited me to go. The week before we were supposed to leave, he announced that he wasn't going to go. He was going to marry his high school sweetheart. And so I ended up going by myself. And I spent the semester in Switzerland that year. And it was great. It was perfect for me at that time. And it really helped me, again, flesh out my worldview, what's important, what I think is important to focus on. I
Absolutely.
came back and there had been a change in the administration at the university, and they decided to eliminate some of the programs. And one of the programs they chose to eliminate was the horticulture program. And so by taking the semester off, I was also a little bit out of sync with the rest of the program. And I had gotten married by the time they made the final decision, and my wife was in an education program. And so I was offered the chance to move to Texas Tech and take all my credits and just slide into their program there with no penalties. But if we moved, then my wife was going to have to start her program over again because they had changed some state laws in the meantime. And so I changed to a history degree because one of these ideas that we had in our minds was maybe becoming a pastor, maybe becoming a missionary, maybe using the agriculture for development work.
I think
When we
I think
got,
I think it's fascinating that you work that whole agriculture interest a little bit farther into becoming a missionary and into serving people with that.
yeah, I mean, well, this is when we got done with college, we graduated in 87. And uh, we were trying to decide what to do. And we had a friend of my mom and dad. We were visiting my mom and dad, and this friend was visiting, and she was on a board of one of these international mission groups. She said one of the biggest problems that they had was people doing years of training, getting overseas, serving one term, and determining that they couldn't handle living in a developing nation or in the rough conditions, that you find in many places in the world. And the groups and the people have invested maybe 10 years of their lives preparing for this, and then they just find out they can't handle it. Sometimes people even going home after just a few months. And so we were living in Texas at the time. I had gone up to Deerfield, Illinois, where the Evangelical Free have a school, a seminary, and we had done the interviews there and everything. And they said, "Here, take these coupons, go to the cafeteria." We went down to the cafeteria. We went in the bathroom, washed our hands and stuff like that. And we came out, and right in front of the doors was a job opportunity board, and they had an international section. And there was this church in Africa looking for a youth pastor for a minimum of 2 years. So we said, "Wow, we could do that before we do anything else. Before we decide to go in." I was considering going to Cornell for the development program there. There's a couple of other schools in the nation that have development programs. We were considering seminary to prepare for, like I said, being a pastor or missionary. And we decided, let's take this chance to live in a developing nation, you know, we to find out, can we do it?
Right.
And while we're there, I'll work for a church and find out, do I like working for a church? And while we're there, we'll see what missionaries do, and we'll figure out, do we want to do that? And while we're there, we'll see what development workers do and visit development projects and figure out, is that what we want to do? So we ended up getting there. The senior pastor resigned about 4 months after I arrived. And it was a church of about 500 people. We had 350 in the morning, about 150 people came at night.
Oh,
We had a lot of people. The morning group tended to be business people and diplomats. The evening group tended to be missionaries that had been in African churches in the morning and wanted to go somewhere at night, where they could worship in English. And so I got to see, we left Africa, and we came to these conclusions. Number one, I should never be a pastor. Number two, Number two was that I really didn't want to be a missionary either. And number three was that one of the things was that I should go into development work. And the reason was that we had seen a lot of development work that really wasn't helping poor people. They were poorly conceived programs. They were more politically motivated show type programs, but poor people were not being impacted in a positive way. And we also saw that a lot of missionaries who had been trained in plant churching and church planting and Bible study writing and preaching and all these things, they were getting to Africa and having to teach people how to manage gardens. because the immediate need in the towns that they were working in was that people were hungry. So we said, look, my interest is plants and gardening and agriculture and all this stuff. And and so that made us come back to the United States and say, that's what we want to do. So I considered going again. I was still considering going to Cornell, and I went to Cornell and I was visiting there and I was talking with a graduate student, and he said that he had been at a conference that year with people from all these international organizations that dealt with agriculture. And he was in a breakout, kind of like a coffee session between sessions at this conference. And he was in a group of half a dozen guys, and they were all drinking coffee and talking. And all of these people made major decisions for agriculture programs around the world, in Africa and Asia and different places. And of those 6 people, only 3 had ever raised a plant.
Oh my God.
And of those 3, only 1 had ever raised any food plants. And it was just a little garden on the side of his house. Okay. And these guys were making decisions for ag programs that were affecting people's lives. Right. So my wife and I decided we wanted to get experience. And we bought a farm in Wisconsin. We moved up to Avoca, Wisconsin. We chose to farm organically. This was when there was no market for organic food. Right. But we chose to do it because we knew that the people that we were going to be working with were going to be too poor to buy inputs. They couldn't buy fertilizers. They couldn't buy herbicides. They couldn't buy tractors, or rototillers or anything like that. They were doing, they were going to be farming, pulling plows with horses or oxen. They were going to just be working with what they had. So that's what we did. But we had to make a living, so we had to make compromises. We raised every type of plant that we could in that climate. So we raised chickens, we raised pigs, anything that we could raise, turn around and get the money back out of it quickly. And we learned what it was like for so many farmers around the world. You have to make these very difficult decisions about, what do I invest in? Do I pay for seed or do I feed my family? If I'm raising pigs, I have to get it big enough to go to market, but that costs money, And if I'm paying for the feed now, do I pay the electric bill?
There's a lot of, right? Yeah, there's a lot of things to consider.
Yeah, these were practical things that we learned. At a certain point, we said, we've learned what we want. We've gone as far as we can with this farm. And so we sold everything. Awesome. And we joined a group called Food for the Hungry International. And when I say everything, I mean everything. We gave away all our furniture. We just basically had nothing, just some mementos.
So you sold everything with the intention of moving overseas and starting a new life.
Yeah, that was what we were going to do. Okay. So we joined Food for the Hungry. We went to Nicaragua, and again, we had set a career goal. Okay, I wanted to be at least a country director or a regional director for an aid and development organization, so that I could have an impact on the decision making of the programs. So I could have an influence on how programs were designed and developed, and so that poor people could really be helped. That was our goal.
And when you say poor people, are you talking about, a small farmers? Right. So you're talking about this on a large scale. You're talking about making a difference in the lives of thousands of people.
Yes, that was the intention. That was exactly the intention. We joined Food for the Hungry, and they seconded me to a Nicaraguan NGO, non-governmental organization, right, called PRODAD. PRODAD stands for Programa de Alimentación y Desarrollo. Alimentación is food, program of food or feeding and development. And they had a demonstration farm. And so and at the time we arrived, they had no money. Okay. Oh, they had $600 in the bank that was left over from a previous program that somebody had funded. But there had been somebody in Managua that had mismanaged money, and the funding got cut off. And so I got there, my wife and I, we were going to handle the funding now and be a responsible party for that. I was going to manage the demonstration farm, and we were going to build a program from scratch.
Awesome.
And so that's what we did.
Awesome.
And the previous program that had run the farm, we kind of inherited the farm from another organization. And they had been focused on introducing new types of food crops. And my focus was different. I got there and I said, is that really our goal? Our goal is food security. Our goal is life security for these families, so they're not living on the edge. And so what I wanted to do was find out what it was they already grew, what it was they would already eat. I didn't want to introduce them to some kind of new food. I want to know what they were eating, and can we do better with what they're already using. And if you ever talk to a Nicaraguan and ask them what food is, they're going to tell you it's white corn tortillas, white rice, and red beans. Okay, well, of course, I know that food is more than that. And and a balanced diet needs to have more than that.
Right.
And they would eat lots of things. They would add lots of things if they were available to their meals. This is how I treat the farmers too. It's like, okay, what do you eat?
Right.
Why is it that you don't plant yellow corn? The rest of the world plants yellow corn. Why do you want white corn? Why do you eat?
It helps to know about
Right.
the community that you're serving. So
Yeah. So we, this motivated. So we focused the farm not on trying to introduce new crops to people, but focus the farm on helping them to do what they were doing better.
Awesome.
So soil conservation. A lot of people farmed on hillsides. So we had to introduce the whole idea of contour curving, soil retention, that type of thing. We did crop diversification. We got people to plant lots of bananas and plantains, avocados and mangoes in the plots around their houses. Like they might have a field where they planted sorghum or corn or red beans, but we would get them to plant all these other types of plants. And it was kind of subversive from our perspective in that we knew that if the plant was there, they would eat it. It would cause them to have better nutrition, better diet. And if they couldn't eat it all, they would have something to sell. And that was the problem with the other program that had the farm before, is they were introducing people to new crops. They liked the food crops, but when they got done, if they had excess, they couldn't sell it. So if you get a family to plant 6 avocado trees, 6 mango trees, theoretically, they could get just from those trees, they would eat what they could, but they'd never be able to eat everything, and they could sell the rest, or they could give it away to friends if they wanted to. Let's say they planted beans and there was a drought.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, then the bean crops fail. But you know what? A tree has a deep root system, and it's going to still produce something.
Absolutely.
So everything that gets produced by the bananas or the avocados, the mangoes, the papayas, things like that, is something that they will eat. It will add diversity to their diet, which everybody needs, and it will serve as a backup income source.
That's incredible. So how did that program end up going, and why did you, obviously it sounds like it was successful, and I'm assuming it was
successful. It's still going on today.
That's fantastic. So why are you not a part of that? Did you just lose interest, or did you leave for a reason?
Well, there was a couple things that happened. Okay. First off, I have to mention this, that after, we had a 3-year commitment, and before the end of 2 years, Food for the Hungry came to me and said they wanted me to open a new work and be the country director at Honduras. So then the country director of the Rwanda field was killed in a plane accident.
Oh.
And so they were looking for somebody to take his place. And they had already decided I was going to do this Honduras thing. And so they approached me to consider doing the Rwanda field. And Rwanda was their largest field at the time. Yeah. And I said, yeah, but my wife was having breathing problems.
Wow.
And by the time they figured it out, her breathing capacity was down to less than 25%.
Oh, so that's obviously why you left
And
Nicaragua.
that's why we had
Oh,
to move back to the United States, is so that
oh
she
my,
could get treated for this disease. And then in the long run, the only way to extend her life, if it was terminal, the only way to extend her life was going to be to get a lung transplant.
oh my goodness.
And of course, the guy who gave us the news about the diagnosis informed us. He had worked in third world countries, developing nations. He had gone on many mission trips, and he knew where we were living, what we were doing. He said, "You guys cannot do this any longer.
Oh,
You're not going to be able to do this any longer." We went back to the house, and the Africa director called me to interview me for that country directorship in Rwanda. So,
oh,
so it was, I don't know that I would have gotten that job, but remember that was our goal,
it was your goal.
and
Yeah.
it was, so it was a gut punch for both of us. She ended up having a double lung transplant. She ended up living for 7.5 years after the transplant. Then I stayed at the church where by this time we were back in the States. I had been asked to pastor. We did it because that's, what we felt we were being led to do. I stayed at the church so as not to disrupt the church by just quitting and leaving quickly.
Right, right.
But after a while, I just decided I really couldn't stay there, because this has been something we were doing together. I needed to do something else. And I told my superiors at the conference. And so I was asked to go to St. Charles.
And
So,
right, right.
and that's when I went to St. Charles. The church there was in the decline. And, that I was asked to turn it around.
And you did.
And
Is that right?
yeah, I mean, there was a lot to that, but they've relocated to a better location in town. They're now called Main Street Church. We sold the building. We retired all of our debt. We bought a new property, which is newer and better and everything. They remodeled and still have no debt. So, you arrive at a place and they've got, $250,000 in debt. You leave and they're out of debt and they've got better facilities and everything. And, there's a lot of boxes I could check, but, when it was done, it was time to leave.
That's amazing. And I think it's amazing too that the programs that you have led, whether it's church or a missionary program, all of these things have developed and become so much better under your care and tutelage. And I think that's an incredible thing. And that's definitely, it shows that you obviously have book skills, but you obviously also have real world skills and experiences. So that's
Yeah, and one of these things I didn't talk about it, but one of these things when we were living in Central America, Hurricane Mitch hit, one of the most devastating storms to hit the Americas.
Yeah.
And in our municipality, over 500 homes were destroyed. And we were asked by the people that were supporting our agriculture work to build houses. Hurricane hit, a lot of houses lost. We ended up doing immediate relief work. We worked, evacuating people out of the lower parts of town. We, what else do we, I mean, there were just all these things, you got people out of town, out of the lower parts of town, you moved them into the churches and into any type of meeting hall or classroom in town was occupied with refugees. We had the farm. So we were able to go and get firewood. Where the location of the town was cut off. All of the bridges and all of the roads that led to the town were washed out. And so people who typically brought firewood into town and sold it so people could cook could not get into town. But we had the farm, we could get to the farm. We could get fresh water because there was a well at the farm that had not been covered with flood water. And there were just different things that we were able to do in immediate relief. And then people were asking us to do post-hurricane recovery work. And so, when I talk about people considering me for these jobs as country director, it wasn't just because I had a program. It was because of the hurricane. It was because of ramping up these programs on short notice, keeping them under control, bringing them back down, making very hard decisions regarding personnel. Um, and we were doing over half a dozen projects at a time. And I had lots of people working for me that were being paid and lots of volunteers. And then we had many work teams coming from the United States. And so I was managing up to 200 people at a time,
That's
you
incredible.
know. And so then when I came back to the States and I was working for the churches, in each case, I went to a church where there was actually a discussion before I got there that they were going to close the church. So, I was going into um, a, a known difficult situation
Of
and
course.
was able to turn the churches around, in both cases, turn the churches around and leave them in a better state than they were when I left. So now I have, and that gives me lots of varied experiences in the development, in the relief, but with budgeting, with proposal writing, with managing all of those things, and managing donors and working with people, because a church runs on donors,
Yeah.
and an agriculture program in a developing nation runs on donors. And you're dealing with USAID, you're dealing with the United Nations, or you're dealing with this family that's going to your church and giving money. So I have the experience of dealing with donors, reporting to them, helping them, working with them to set proper goals in the context that I'm working, and then reporting back, telling people what we've done. And at this stage, I would like to get back into the development work. And I would like people to understand that, yeah, I worked for a church, but you got to understand that what I did for a church is the same thing that I would do working for an agriculture program or a health and nutrition program somewhere in Africa. You're doing the same things. You're budgeting, you're planning, you're setting a vision, you are reporting. There's relations. You're going and representing the organization in the public forums in different situations, and they're not that dissimilar.
Right. Absolutely.
So I have over 20 years of management experience, well over 20 years of management experience, and it's diverse and
Absolutely.
it's cross-cultural, because everywhere you work is cross-cultural.
That's an amazing, it's an amazing story, and it's an amazing set of qualifications, goals, and values, that you are bringing to wherever it is that you're going next. Is there anything that is your passion that you think people need to know about?
Yeah, yeah. My worldview, in my worldview, people have value. People are not disposable. And every person, they don't just have value, they also have potential. And that potential is oftentimes uh, thwarted or, beaten down by life situations. And I know that I'm an incredibly privileged person, but I also believe that it means I have responsibility to take the privileges that I've been given, the experiences, the opportunities, and leverage them to help people that don't have that kind of privilege and opportunity that I've been given, you know, by the lottery of where you were born and what family you were born into, you know, and that people don't have to suffer. That people have potential and they need to be encouraged in that and taught. And I want to go out and I want to help people not suffer. I want help people to reach the potential. And there's just so many different ways that can be done.
Yeah.
And so, for example, I'm just going to go back to the agriculture program. We talked about food security. Okay. That is an important issue. Kids have to have food to develop properly, for their brains to develop properly. But when you're feeding, it's not just providing enough food for today, it's having balanced nutrition, the right vitamins so that you digest the food right and so that the body develops right. So when we got people to grow vegetables and fruits and diversify their diet, there was an ulterior motive behind this, is to get people, get the families, get the kids developing properly. You treat the kids for parasites. Okay, you don't people don't think about that, right? But most people in this world have to deal with intestinal parasites. And so when you are feeding somebody, you want a kid to go to school, you want them to learn, you give them food, or make it possible for them to have food. Now they have to digest it. It has to get into their body. They can't be taken by, so, these types of programs need to be holistic. Somebody who's running them needs to have the experience of dealing with all of these things. Clean water, hygiene, all of these things play in together to make sure that people don't uh, suffer unnecessarily, and so that people can recognize potential that they have when they are born. I just want to make a difference in people's lives, and a major difference and an impact. And that's what, yeah.
That's incredible. Thank you, Dave. It has been incredible talking with you. Amazing hearing your story and your background, and I'm very excited to see where you will go next. So thank you. So what we'll do is at the end we will put up a slide that has all of your contact information as well, so that we can be sure that the people who have seen you and are of course impressed with your potential can get in touch with you. So
Yeah.
this has been Person of Interest. I'm Vicki Kellick with Baird and Warner. This is Dave Mann, um, an amazing person who I am now glad that you've had the chance to know. So thank you again, Dave, and we will
All right.
hopefully hear from you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us to learn about today's Person of Interest, Dave Mann. Dave can be reached via email, phone, or his LinkedIn page. I'm Vicki Kellick with Baird and Warner Fox Valley. From historical homes to luxury properties, contact me to see how I can help get you home. Thanks for joining us. See you again soon.